In a club with someone and I pipe down. Shawty got me out too high. I be stepping on the beach in some white ones. Can't control, I think I'm too fly.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another video with On Point Politics, joined by Gold Crown Politics on a new episode of the channel. And today we're going to be talking about Allan Lichtman and the failed professor on his 13 keys prediction, where he predicted Kamala Harris to win the presidential election instead of Donald Trump, who clearly won the presidential election, like me and Gold Crown Politics also predicted. Hit the like button and subscribe for more content just like this. Gold Crown, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hey guys, Gold Crown Politics here. On point, thanks for having me on. Let's get into these 13 keys. Let's talk about them.
So this is the first thing, guys. So he has these 13 keys. It's like a true and false system where you have 13 questions that can be true or false, and whoever gets, I believe it tests the incumbent party strength of the White House, right? And so what it is when you go ahead and look at them, you see these are the 13 keys. The first one is midterm games. So does the incumbent party hold, midterm gains, which he had false? Then if you look at the no primary contest key, it says there is no serious contest for the incumbent party nomination. He had this true, which we're going to get to that in a second. I'm going to just be listing what he put for each of these keys. A key 3, incumbent seeking re-election. He had certainly false, no third party. He had that true. Short-term economy and long-term economy. He had both of these true. He had major policy change true. He had no social unrest true. He had no scandal, certainly true. He had no foreign military failure is false, but he had major foreign/military success true, which doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. The incumbent party candidate is charismatic or a national hero. He had that false, and he had uncharismatic challenger was true. And so that gives Harris 9 keys out of the 13, and Donald Trump falls roughly too short, because if he had 6 keys, he would effectively have won with this system. All you had to do is flip back the economy keys, and we're going to be going over a lot of these and saying why, he basically got these wrong, because it's kind of hilarious. Again, it's not the keys that were the problem, because the keys are actually pretty decent. The system's not bad. It's the person behind them. And since he is an arrogant prick, essentially, he pretty much decided to shame everybody for trying to tell him and give him advice on, hey, like, you should really use your keys this way. And then on an interview, he got all mad and was like, oh, actually, I'm the one who can turn the keys right. It's just so weird. It's like, what? Like, I just don't understand that. It's like, hey, like, you're a professor from Harvard. You should be able to go back and check your biases and make sure that you're not getting this wrong. Like, I honestly don't even know if he was doing this honestly this year, because he was so off the rails that I almost think they really paid him off, because in my opinion, he's been right the entire time. And we're going to be getting into the reasoning of his keys, and we'll have Gold Crown kind of go through these keys and where they should be. But we're going to listen to this really quick. This is a tidbit from the live stream after the election. If you guys haven't seen the live stream while they streamed the election, you should go watch it, because it's absolutely hilarious. Like, he was literally losing his mind. He was saying that Florida was going to be close before Miami-Dade and Palm Beach reported. He said Pennsylvania was going to go to Harris like all night until it's like 90% in. But we're going to be going ahead and playing this clip from Allan Lichtman and his son really quick.
Do you think the issue is that Trump is beyond the keys and Trump changed the locks?
I think that's a little too glib. It's not just Trump. Trump blipped out tomorrow. Nothing much would change. It's the deeper forces that I outlined of deception, racism, misogyny, and xenophobia, which are by no means limited to Trump.
Do you think the issue is that...
So he goes on to elaborate in another piece and explain that apparently the electorate is no longer rational enough for his keys. So he said out loud, he literally said that he has no there was no error in his interpretation of the keys, which is false because we can literally go over them right here and prove to you, even according to his own word, his own analysis, that this was the wrong interpretation of the date of the cycle. But he's also saying that the electorate's too irrational now, that apparently the keys only serve a rational electorate. It's like he's saying that now the voters are too racist, xenophobic, and sexist to fit the modeling of the keys, and therefore the keys are no longer useful. And now everybody's like, you got to add this key and add another one. And he's like, we can't change the model based off of one cycle where I got it incorrect. But here's the thing. If that was true, let's say that the electorate was too rational, too racist in this, then the keys wouldn't have worked in 1860 when Abraham Lincoln got elected as president, or they would have worked in 1964 when Lyndon B. Johnson won in a landslide. Because if that was the case, then the electorate would have voted for the other candidate. But that didn't happen, though. We probably would have gotten a lot more Democratic presidents out of it if that was the case. So it doesn't really make any sense, because if anything, the electorate's gotten less racist, less sexist, less xenophobic than it was 100 years ago, realistically. And so if that was true, then he would have gotten a bunch of elections wrong if that could have been the case. He would have gotten Obama wrong if that would have been the case. It doesn't make any sense, because something like that doesn't really necessarily change over time that way. If anything, it's gotten better in terms of going in a lesser xenophobic, lesser racist electorate even. I mean, for crying out loud, his case predicted Obama twice in 2008 and 2012, and Obama was a black president. Yes, he was half white, but he was still a black president. It didn't matter. He still won an election, and not even that. He won the election quite easily. Both elections, he won pretty easily. So to say that, oh, you know, the electorate's too racist, too xenophobic, really just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Well, you know, he tested this back to 1860 and has basically gotten every single election correct, according to him. And you go back, and it does get most of the winners correct, going all the way to 1860. So it actually is a pretty good system, but he just couldn't let the Trump derangement syndrome get out of his head, or he was paid to be that way. It's either one. And so right now, what's really, really fascinating to me is that he couldn't even self-reflect and realize that he just analyzed his keys incorrectly. And Gold Crown, I kind of want you to go over and talk about, like, what do you see with these keys? Like, which ones do you think were some flawed analysis? I'm going to start out with short-term economy and long-term economy. In his book from 1992, he literally states that if the majority of Americans perceive the economy to not be well, you should flip these false against the incumbent party, which he did in 1992. If you go over here and look at the Wikipedia page, and you literally go to 1992 and look at the short-term and long-term economy, if you go over here, it says, right here, it says, in the early 1990s recession ended in March 1991, but the National Bureau of Economic Research did not declare the recession had ended until 50 days after the election, thus turning the key false. And he had also said that there was something about the fact that the majority of Americans had also perceived the economy to also be bad as well. So that was also another thing too. A majority of Americans, according to a certain metric, also found the economy to not be favorable. And in his own book, he literally stated that if the perception of the economy is bad with the voters, that the key should be false. It literally says it in his book from 1992. And he could have done the exact same thing right now, and he didn't do that. And so that really basically messed up his prediction. Now, Gold Crown, I want you to go ahead and take away and go with these keys and kind of see what really could have been done here for him to get this correct.
Well, I would certainly say that the first three keys are probably correct. Those are pretty objective measurements. I'd say looking at key 4, the no third party, That one's kind of interesting because, as you kind of alluded to with the economy keys, Lichtman, he kind of has changed the goalpost when it comes to the standard in which he measures the key. So, for example, he used to kind of measure the no third party key as third parties being over about 5%, but as of recently he changed that standard. They have to now be 10% of the total vote share in terms of third parties hurting the incumbent party. So he's kind of changing the goalpost and everything. And he marked this key, key 4, no third party. He marked it true in favor of Harris, basically meaning that third parties would have no negative impact, in terms of hurting Harris's campaign. But that obviously is false. You can mark that key false on point because it is certain that Jill Stein and Cornel West, these far left candidates, definitely pulled some vote share from Kamala Harris, and they were well under 10%, even well under 5% of the vote share. And so Lichtman, he wasn't being very objective of that. Not only did he change the goalpost when it came to the standard of that key, but he's also, not understanding that, because these elections are so razor thin now, even a 0.5% of a candidate, of a third party candidate running in this race can change the outcome, just like 2016, where you had Jill Stein peeling off about 1% nationally from Hillary Clinton in the Rust Belt, basically flipping it red. If she hadn't ran in 2016, to be honest, Trump probably would have lost. So third party candidates can be very impactful, well under 5% of the vote share. And I think that's where he got it wrong. He marked this key true favoring Harris, but it absolutely was false. And then, as you alluded to with both of the economy keys, I think that those could definitely both be marked false as well. He marked both of those true for Harris, but once again, guys, he changed the goalpost. He basically said back in the 90s that the economy key should be judged based upon voter perception and how these voters are feeling about the economy. But as of recently, he changed it and basically said no, it has nothing to do with how voters actually feel. It doesn't even have to do with inflation. It just has to do with GDP. That's basically what he said. And so those are definitely false. I mean, voters, they definitely went against Harris this time because the economy has been in shambles in the sense that people have not been able to afford gas, afford groceries, afford rent. And so that absolutely was a referendum on the incumbent party. And so those two definitely would be false. And already we have 7 keys that are false. So already, not even going all the way through this, Trump would have won the election based upon the keys, looking at them more objectively. And you can finish out some of the rest of the keys if you'd like to.
Going on to the keys here, I mean, major policy change in the objective way that he looks at it. This is technically true because there was a lot of policy change. No social unrest, Allan. Unfortunately, this is going to be in the false column. I mean, you literally had a former president basically almost get assassinated. And here's the thing. His logic about this is that he thought on his coping stream, he's like, oh, dude, it doesn't make any sense. Why does no one care when Trump gets convicted? But then when Biden supposedly has a bad debate, it's the end of the world for Biden. Well, it's because that the majority of Americans were literally polled and they thought that the trials were basically a sham. So that's the first thing. And you could see it in the data that every time that would happen, he would increase his support every time that would happen. So that's pretty interesting. Second of all, the other problem with that is that Biden was actually mentally incompetent. He just doesn't seem to want to admit that Biden actually has like a mental issue. I mean, I don't really understand why he just doesn't want to admit it. And so no scandal's a little bit tricky, but just for the sake of this, just because of the fact Biden technically doesn't have an official impeachment, we're not going to put this false, but Trump's already won either way. Major foreign/military success, that could be false. There was no success in the administration at all. Not even close, like at all. Barely any success whatsoever at all. I mean, it was a bunch of failures, not really any successes. I mean, the state of affairs, foreign nations, a lot more wars were happening. And look at this. Now that Donald Trump got reelected, Hamas wants to end the war. Putin wants to come to the negotiating table, and Zelensky does as well. Trump already had a phone call with Elon. A bunch of Mexican caravans just turned around and just left. They went the other way already. The EU wants to essentially now buy gasoline from the United States instead of Russia. The Russians want to use the US dollar to sell Russia or to sell gasoline now. Like, complete 180 from this administration. Complete 180, not even close. And charismatic incumbent is false because Kamala Harris is not, or Biden doesn't have over 60% approval rating. And the same thing for Trump, because he's actually been pretty consistent with that metric. He has said that the candidate has to have over a 60% approval rating in order for this to be true. And it is at least true for Trump because he doesn't have a 60% approval rating. And then it's false for charismatic incumbent because Biden's in the low 40s. So when you look at this, it's actually the exact opposite of his official projection, where Harris had 9 and he only had 4. Now it's the other way around. Now we see that Trump is winning quite easily now in this forecast that we have using the keys right now. So he really should have had 9 out of the 13 keys instead of 4. So we literally gave him 5 keys. You could even argue that the no primary contest key is even a little bit objective because Kamala Harris was not even democratically elected to the presidency. And so you could even make a case that there could be 10 to 11 if you want to give the scandal key false. But in objective reality, this is more like how he's actually graded himself before. And I would argue that a presidential candidate would cause a lot of social unrest. I mean, I don't really see how that wouldn't be debatable. And so the fact that he left this true is honestly really ridiculous. Like, it's just extremely ridiculous how he even left that false. Even no third party, like Goldcrown mentioned, yes, they didn't get over 5%, but he's been very wishy-washy with that metric. And they objectively cost Kamala Harris the presidency in the Rust Belt states. If there wasn't any third-party candidates, you could have actually had Kamala Harris possibly get close in the 3 Rust Belt states, probably even take them if she netted some votes there. So they did actually make somewhat of a difference. So again, to say they didn't really doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And if you actually look at the amount of votes that they had, even if you gave all of them to Kamala Harris, she probably still wouldn't have even won those swing states. And if you were to somehow give this back and say there was no third party, Trump would still win. And that kind of reaffirms my assessment there of how they really wouldn't have affected the margins there at all. That kind of shows how we were actually correct on assessing these keys, because Trump still would have won in that case. But all right, guys, this is pretty much it for this. I mean, Allan Lichtman was super wrong. He didn't know how to use this system this year. Super incorrect. This was his electoral map. He was looking at the early vote data and saying, okay, well, this woman split's pretty good for Kamala Harris. So I'm actually going to give her the state because more women are voting now than ever before. It's like, no, buddy, it's not how it works. Party registration was a lot better. Way better than years past. I mean, I just don't understand. The early voting was way better for Republicans than years past. And this was his electoral college map prediction where he had 302 to 236. Just a horrible projection. He literally got 5 states and the winner incorrect. And it was done off of, feeling-based analysis. And so, Goldcrown, you have any comments on Allan Lichtman, his analysis of the 13 keys?
Well, I think I would certainly finish with saying this. I will say that I think that I have a decent amount of respect for his keys, just in the sense that it's more of a non-conventional way of predicting elections, and I personally really like that. However, like we've basically gone on through this video, guys, like his system, it's not that it's inherently a flawed system. He's just not being objective with it. Like, it's not that the keys are wrong. It's just that, like we showed you, he applied them in an incorrect fashion. And, going through each key objectively, it's definitely true that Trump would have won, or you could have predicted a Trump victory using the 13 keys. And he just wasn't using them correctly. So that's kind of an interesting thing to see there. And it's also kind of interesting to see how he was kind of using this false logic going, state by state, because he made this election prediction. Like, he actually had an electoral map as I'm sure that many of you guys saw, which he doesn't normally do, which is interesting. And it's kind of stupid because he was basically trying to justify his keys, having Harris winning by saying, oh, well, females and women are voting in these record high numbers in the early voting, which makes absolutely no sense because you have states with much higher female electorates like Michigan and Texas that actually both went red this cycle. They were like, I think it was both those states were like +6 or +8 female in terms of the electorate, and they both went red. They both went for Trump. So he has no idea what he's talking about, especially when it comes to understanding demographics in terms of predicting elections. But focusing just on the keys, he also failed to do that correctly. He was not objective. He was not being honest with us either. And to be honest, I would not be surprised if he was paid out basically to just have Harris win according to his keys and basically promote it as some biased thing to proper up in the media. And he definitely has lost a lot of credibility after this cycle. And, regardless of what his prediction is for, upcoming elections, I would say take it with a heavy grain of salt because this guy has he's lost a lot of credibility in terms of being an objective forecaster.
Right. And to even give him credit, because in 2000, Al Gore was projected in his model, but Bush ended up winning by like 500 votes in Florida, which you could even actually argue that was probably stolen, because I actually agree with him there. It probably was a stolen election there for what is it called, for Al Gore. I actually think he probably won Florida. But even then, like, you even see it in, like, even if you were to look at all the Gallup fundamentals, which were really accurate this cycle, by the way. The Gallup polling was amazing this cycle once again. And when you look at all the fundamentals in 2000, they heavily favored Democrats by a lot. And so a lot of the fundamental modeling for 2000 was just not working well. And it means Al Gore was just not the best candidate that they could have put up. And maybe it really was the party, people were just tired of the Democrat Party after 8 years. So they even give him credit in an election like that was decided within 500 votes, which realistically could have gone to the candidate that was supposed to win Florida. Then, yeah, something like that. And Al Gore still won the popular votes. So it's like, okay. But this time, he just completely messed it up. I mean, it was so obvious. I mean, Trump's going to win the popular vote by like 1 or 2 points. And he won the Electoral College with over 300 electoral votes. So this guy this time was just dead wrong, like completely dead wrong. He can't play this popular vote versus Electoral College game with this one at all. He cannot do that this time whatsoever. And so now that he wants to say that apparently these right-wing wannabe journalists were trying to discredit his system, well, these 2 right-wing wannabe journalists, whatever that is, have just completely destroyed your model because you don't know how to use it. We just literally used it better than you, and now we got the winner correct. And so, and it's not because the electorate's racist, xenophobic. It's not because of that, Allan. It's because of you. You cannot put your biases aside. Is it crazy that a president got elected after having guilty convictions? You could say that it is historically unprecedented. You could say that. But again, if you looked at the data and you looked at the fundamentals and you really honestly put your biases aside and you looked at it objectively, like we just did right now, you could have gotten the winner right. But now, does it even matter what he predicts? Because if he predicts the Democrat, everybody's just going to be like, oh, yeah, he just likes the Democrat. So it's like, yeah, he's going to predict the Democrat winning now for whatever he does, if he's even relevant, which I hope he's not. But we're just doing this video to finally expose him once and for all. But in reality, it's like, yeah, whenever he has the Democrat winning now, it's just because he wants the Democrat to win. That's about it. And I wouldn't have even honestly been surprised if they really did pay him off. But all right, guys, that is pretty much it for this video. Make sure to hit the like button and to subscribe if you want more content just like this. And I will see you guys in the next video. Any closing comments, Gold Crown?
Well, thanks for having me on Point for this collaboration. Thanks for watching this video, guys.